Hello and welcome to People and Profit, where we look at how business shapes our world. This week, we're looking back at the business year in France and ahead to what 2017 has in store. Coming up, landmark reforms but major protests. Will 2016's controversial changes to labour law help French businesses? He once called himself the enemy of finance, but was François Hollande a good president for entrepreneurs? And looking ahead to 2017, what the business community will want to hear from the presidential candidates. Well, to talk about these topics and more, I'm joined by two entrepreneurs who've started companies here in Paris. Ardith Aminou is the chief executive of Optimiam, an app that helps consumers buy discounted food and reduce food waste for retailers. Thank you for being with us. François Hollande is the co-founder of Pop Chef, which cooks and delivers gourmet lunches here in Paris. Thank you. And we're joined as well by Pierre Briançon, senior correspondent at Politico. Thank you to you all for joining us. Let's start with one of those major economic reforms of the year, the changes to France's labour laws that made it easier to fire workers under certain circumstances. The controversial law, named after Labour Minister Myriam El Khomri, was passed after 14 nationwide days of protests between March and September that caused disruption to transport, schools and other services. Pierre Briançon, they were reforms that many other countries would have seen as quite minor, but was it worth it for the French government or for business?
Well, the part of the law that really triggered all the protests we saw last spring was a very specific article on which the government actually didn't concede anything, which was a simple article allowing labour and work negotiations to happen at the company level as opposed to big industrial sectors or even on the national levels. This is why one of the largest union in France, which is kind of a very hostile to any form of reform of the labour market, was very much opposed to it. Another very influential union was very much in favour of it. And actually the reason the government didn't back down was because that union, CFDT, as we know it, was very much in favour of that reform. So even the union movement was divided over this. The problem is that this particular reform will take years before you can see actual results in the economy. And the law didn't really make firing easier. It didn't do anything to the labour contracts. I mean, it didn't go very far.
It just widened the definitions that companies can use
it tried to give more the predictability to the cost of firing people, which is a huge matter, huge legal matter, considering the complexity and the arcanes of labour laws here. But this is the type of reform that François Hollande couldn't count on to get some political leverage, because he knew, and everyone knew, all the economists knew, that it will take years because you actually see it in any kind of numbers.
François Hollande, would this encourage you, these changes, to hire more people, or do you think it'll be a good thing for your business?
We hire people anyways because we're growing and we have to. Definitely the labour law has to be much more flexible. Everyone agrees on that. I think there's another part on this law which is also very interesting. But not very people talked about it, but it concerns contractors. And Pop Chef discussed with Myriam El Khomri's cabinet. We had talks about how to make it more flexible for contractors to deliver, to repair stuff, to ride bikes for Pop Chef, etc. And I think it's something that has to be much more flexible. The collaborative economy has to be seen as something other than a black market economy. And it's important. I think this law goes in the right way.
Okay, Ardith, would you agree? Do you think it'll help things for your business in the future?
Regarding this law, actually, as François said, we are a startup, so we need to recruit people in order to grow. So regarding this law or not, we have to recruit people. But I think I'm going to sound like a broken record, but our main problem here as a startup, but also as an entrepreneur, is the taxes related to payroll. Because at the end of the day, even if we want to recruit this talent inside of our company, we think twice before doing that.
And I mean, if you consider reducing payroll taxes was something that François Hollande promised quite early on in his presidency, that hasn't gone far enough for you.
No.
Although he did.
He did, and by quite a significant amount.
Well, the interesting part is, probably the whole labour law dispute will bring some results. Because if you're looking at getting ahead of ourselves, I was looking at the presidential campaign next year. Most serious candidates are now advocating to go further in terms of labor law and further in terms of labor costs, reducing the payroll taxes, especially those on employees, by the way, not on employers, but at least that's a start and it may help. Macron, for example, the former economy minister, has a plan to cut down the taxes, and both for the healthcare and unemployment benefits. François Fillon, the conservative candidate, also wants to cut payroll taxes. And so this part, I mean, there's, in a way, the discussion, as hard as it has been, is about to bring some progress. But the other thing is that you point out the very specific French thing, which is the French labor law, because of its rigidity, cannot cope with professions, jobs that were inconceivable even 5 years ago. New types of jobs, new types of relationship between the employers and his boss or his employer. And so you see it in the service industry, the Uber and all the Airbnbs of the world, and in some specific jobs, like you, in fact, your type of company didn't exist 5 years ago.
Absolutely.
Okay, and the French system, because of its rigidity, is very, very stubborn and a centralized way of dealing with things, where you have kind of treat everyone with a cookie cutter type of approach, can't deal with new jobs and new professions. And the challenge probably for the years to come is precisely to be flexible enough to be able to deal with jobs that you couldn't conceive 5 years ago.
And is that? And would you say that's a failure of François Hollande over the past 5 years to not have his government not moving fast enough to, facilitate companies like yours?
I think it's a failure of every single government we've had in a long time. I mean, not specifically François Hollande's governments, but I mean, everyone agrees that labor law is way too complicated in France. If you look at the labor law code, it's actually the biggest code in French and in France, and it's just way too heavy. It needs to be divided by two.
But when you look at the protests that happened, and the disruption that happened to the whole country, there are obviously people that do oppose changes to it. And I suppose there's a question about how do you convince them as well? People want to use services like yours.
I'm not actually sure that's entirely true. I think people were opposed to a very specific article, which was the one Pierre pointed out. I'm not really sure that I haven't heard that many protests on this law about the fact that we were reducing taxes for companies.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Plus a lot of people who demonstrated. You have to remember this came at the lowest level of any president or prime minister in terms of popularity, the highly unpopular government. I mean, the protests were also about that, and a lot of demonstrators didn't actually know what was in the labor law, except, it was a protest against the government's whole record in the last 4 years, not really specifically about the idea of changing the labor market.
Protesting is a very French thing, also.
Rodolphe, there was another policy, of course, of the current government that benefited your business, this policy to cut food waste from retailers.
Yes, actually, the law has been adopted in February 2016. This law forbidden supermarket and hypermarket to destroy edible food. So they have to find a solution, either give this food to food banks or find a solution like Optimiam to sell on time their food surplus. So I cannot say for now that if this law actually benefit for business, because we were already working with supermarket, but on the consumer side, we have a big visibility. I have to be honest, today, food waste has been a trendy topic in France for the retailer, but also for the consumer who really are aware of this concept today.
Okay. Well, let's, I suppose, look ahead then to what's coming up in 2017. François, what do you want to be hearing from presidential candidates running up to the elections?
I think that I'm pretty optimistic because people are creating startups. France is actually becoming one of the biggest countries for startups in Europe. And I mean, if I've really one thing I'd like to say is just there's a million reasons your business can fail. I mean, wrong product, wrong team, wrong market, everything. But the French economy isn't one. And France is a great place to start your company. I think it's actually one of the best countries to start your company because, the public bank really helps you out. You can hire really quickly at first. There's maybe a problem when you reach a certain size.
Yeah.
At that point, you're no longer a cool entrepreneur. You're a mean boss, and then the state comes down on you. But really, France is a great place to start companies, and I really wish the government would point that out more, and we would stop about this French bashing hype. Where everyone says that France is a really dangerous place for the economy. That's not true.
Okay, and I mean, Rauda, are there particular policies that you're looking out for when these election
I totally
candidates?
agree with François. France is a great place to start company. But after, for example, for Optimia, we did our first fundraising in January, and now we are going to start thinking about the second fundraising, the Series A. So I think that in France we have, the government have to keep working on creating some measurements which will help rich people, to keep investing in startup, because we still have to recruit people. We have many unemployment people who want to work, and I think startup is today a kind of solution for these people.
And those startups need investment, so they need that money to come from somewhere. Pierre Briançon, we're already hearing big promises from those candidates. Do you think the economy is going to play that prominent a role? Are French voters ready to be convinced by economic policies?
In a country where unemployment still is way above, or is slightly above 10%, I mean, it's one of the worst in the EU as a whole, the economy will play a central role. There's absolutely no doubt about that. What the candidates are proposing is going to be an interesting debate, whether you're going to see voters radicalizing on the left side or on the right side, actually. But I mean, the election of François Fillon, the Conservative, the nomination as a Conservative candidate, is kind of an interesting, I think, thing that happened in French politics, because a lot of people seem to be willing to shake up things. Good or bad, you decide whether, depending on which side of the political spectrum you stand. But at least the idea that there needs to be something, and in many ways, just as you were saying, the big challenge for the government is not to do something, is to get off people's backs in a way, in many ways. So the question would not be what is the government doing for us, but what is it stopping to do to prevent us from growing, from considering, as you said, in France, all the small companies are absolutely wonderful, and then as soon as they become even medium-sized, they become the dirty exploiter of the proletariat. And so, of course, there's going to be an administrative, a bureaucratic change of mind among, fiscal, the tax approach, the fiscal approach as well. And so, it's going to be a challenge, because then it's not going to be a matter of which reform you pass through Parliament, but how the bureaucracy is implementing them, or stop implementing the most ridiculous aspects of the labor code.
Okay. I also think, if I can add something to that, our main problem is we need to stop adding laws all the time. I mean, seriously, it's really, I think one of the main reasons venture funds don't come to France is because they're scared that a new law is going to pop up anytime soon. A few years ago, we had this ridiculous law saying that if an entrepreneur sells his shares, he's going to have to give away 75% to the state, which obviously was dropped out because it made no sense. But, people are scared, and there's some sort of legal uncertainty. I think it's really important that, get off our backs. Right? Okay. Let entrepreneurs do their jobs and stop having laws all the time.
And give some kind of long-term perspective. On tax matters, for example, it's a crucial thing. You want to know not only what the tax system will be next year, but what is it going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? If you want to attract investors, especially in startups, they need to have a clear idea of how profits are going to be taxed or whatever.
Okay, well, we'll have to wait and see if they take up your suggestions. Thank you to all of my guests for joining us on the special People in Profit. You can join the conversation on Facebook at France 24 Business, or you can tweet me as well at NewsStephen. Until next time, thanks for watching.